Hello and welcome to another Which Bookie preview. This time we are looking at Boxing Day and beyond. The festive racing calendar is always action-packed. This year looks probably better than ever. There's only 47 confirmations or declarations for Boxing Day at Kempton. 11 of those, though, are in the King George. And then, of course, we've got Lossy versus Constitution Hill. So the rest of the races are just sort of supporting acts, really, aren't they? I'm joined by Will Smith. Myself and Will actually have been in all right form at the moment. We had 12-1 winner, Fiercely Proud at Ascot on Saturday. The racing is starting to ramp up, but of course there is so much action to get through Boxing Day, so I won't waffle on for too long. It's just probably worth mentioning that there is so much action. You obviously don't have to bet in every single race. Please do gamble responsibly, and as much as we're going to cover lots of horses within this particular preview, there is 72 hours now between some of these races, even 96 hours with the Friday declaration. So please make sure you check out the Which Bookie Daily Tips website, because obviously once weather's been factored in and market moves have been factored in, that will give you our final selections. I'll put a link to that in the description. If you're new to the channel, please make sure you're subscribed. And if you're not new or you just want to be nice, then just like the video because it does help us out as well. So Will, with the formalities out the way, I've got a running order. We've spoken a little bit beforehand for some good bets we think we've already found for Boxing Day and beyond. But before we crack on and do it in sort of chronological order, I've got to ask you about the two big races at Kempton on Boxing Day. The King George is obviously the feature event, probably of the whole Christmas period. But before we do that, who wins, Lossy or Constitution Hill?
Good question. Yeah, festive greetings to you, Dave, and everyone else watching. Yeah, it's a cracker, isn't it? It's one of a few duels we've got over the festive period here, with potentially Ballyburn and Sagino and Stateman and Brighter Days Ahead over in Ireland as well. It's a real toss-up for me because you just don't know the kind of level that Constitution Hill is able to perform to after his sort of travails of the last year or so. And the one thing that we know for sure is Lossy will provide a very, very stern test to find out whether he is up to the levels that he was at. So it really isn't a betting race for me by any stretch of the imagination, but probably the most important race, most informative race of the whole festive period, actually. So I'm not going to give a selection, not going to recommend anything. I'm just fascinated to see how it pans out. And the good thing is we're probably going to have a decent tempo in the race with Lump Sum and Burdett Road in there, because they're horses that do go forward. So it's set up quite nicely to be a real cracker.
Absolutely. I'm still hoping that Constitution Hill just wallops her, because she's 160 rated, he's 175. Obviously, he's had his issues. She's coming here in good form. But if he does smack up Lossy, she is an aeroplane in her own right, isn't she? It will hopefully just lead on to Constitution Hill being able to fulfill that potential. But I don't know whether that'll happen or not. Obviously, none of us do. Like you say, it's not really a betting heat, but it's going to be a cracking race. Another race that's going to be a cracker, Will. 11 runners in the King George. I know that potentially has been like an up and down season, I guess, from where we started at the beginning of the year in terms of favourites. Gaelic Warrior not coming in, staying at 2 miles this season. Him last season as well, when it started the season as Stayers Hurdle favourite and goes and wins an Arkle. So not like Gary Gaelic Warrior to be doing that to us. But we've got like one of the most competitive King Georges I've looked at on paper for quite a while. So I'd be very keen to know your thoughts. And have you managed to side with one selection in here, or will you play a couple?
It's I think because it's so open, because there isn't any particular sort of standout in this, that's why everyone feels they could have a crack at it. You know, it's a very winnable Grade 1, and there are plenty of horses that that you can make a reliable case for on their day. The fact is that quite a few of them are coming here, though, and we don't really know whether they're able to sort of have their day again. The likes of sort of Brave Man's Game and one or two others who have maybe been there, done it, but just sort of edging over back onto the other side of that particular curve. But the one that I thought, and now we've got the decks, a lot of bookmakers are offering 4 places on the race as well. The one that I thought might just be worth a small each way squeak was the Real Whacker, because his Charlie Hall chase run was a really, really good one. I mean, that was a bounce right back to form for him. Don't forget he's a Cheltenham Festival winner. I've always felt he'd be slightly better right-handed as well, because he can shift that way a little bit with his jumping. He's a prominent racer. It was a very good time, the Charlie Hall. He beat Brave Man's Game, obviously, on that occasion, who was probably a big price himself, actually, in the blinkers as well. But the Real Whacker, I think, is the one that's maybe just been a little bit lost in a lot of market moves for various other horses. And he's the one that he comes in here off the back of a career best run. The track should suit. I know he was disappointing in the race last year, but I don't think he was in the right kind of form all season, really, last year. And I think he's back to the form that he was in his novice year. And I think that could see him go very, very well at a big old price for the real whacker. I think he's about 22s in a couple of places for 4 places. So that's probably going to be the smallish each way bet that I have in the race.
Yep, fair enough. And of course, good ground. It looks like it's going to be at Kempton. I'm sure they'll water it to make sure that it's sort of on the easy side of good. But that's the problem with Real Wacker last season, I think, as well, wasn't it? Quite a lot of rain came down. He was supposed to run at Haydock, and obviously the heavens opened. So this is probably his chance to do it, like it was in that Charlie Hall. Interestingly, Will, I really fancied Brave Man's Game in that Charlie Hall. I was quite forgiving, thought it was a lowly race that he could be getting his sort of head back in front of him, but he was poor in that. And I thought to myself, I'll never back Brave Man's Game again. Then they've run him at Haydock. And now I look at this King George and think, he could have won it last year if Shishkin hadn't have gone. I mean, Shishkin would have won it if he stood up, but the interference that Shishkin gave to Brave Man's Game, I think, cost him the race in losing to Hewick. Obviously, he did win it before, and it's Paul Nicholls and a King George, isn't it? So just him, he's 20 to 1 top price. Like I said, there's 4 places up for grabs. I feel like he's an obvious shortener. I don't really like the headgear on him, but there's no point arguing which way they need to do things with that in terms of whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, because you're having to take a swing on Brave Man's Game because he's been nowhere near the level of form that he has shown in previous years, but they don't get any wins out of him in the spring, really, do they? So Paul Nicholls must have been targeting this race all season. And obviously last year, they were 2 underwhelming efforts, admittedly better than this year, but he pretty much got so close to winning a King George that it was a good enough effort to say that on his day, he could still do it. The ones at the front of the market, I think everyone's probably on at nicer prices, so they all look a little bit short now. But yeah, it's not one that I'll be getting heavily invested in. But sadly, I've gone against myself and said I'd never back Brave Man's Game again. But now it's Kempton, the King George, Paul Nicholls. I'm having a small each way play on Brave Man's Game. But you're right with the Real Whacker as well. It brings the 2 of them in, doesn't it? If I'm backing Brave Man's Game, I should be thinking about him too. But it's one of those races, isn't it? You could make a case for most of them, and you could probably look at the price and think most of them maybe are about fair. Yeah. I mean, that's enough on the King George, I think.
I think so. Yeah, I think you're right. At the top of the market, I don't think they've done enough, those at the top of the market, and certainly recently, to be the price they are compared to a few of the others at bigger prices.
It's hard, isn't it? Because obviously, Ile France-Saying that Feltham last year was so good, but then he's a bleeder now as well, and obviously he's been beaten at prices. But there's a few of them at the top, like on their very best, they potentially slam the field, but you can't guarantee that any of them are going to do that. It just looks like such a good race, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, it does. Yeah, another cracker.
Absolutely. But we're going to go back to do it in sort of chronological order now. We'll stick with Kempton for the time being, Will, before we move across to Aintree, and then we've got one at Wetherby we want to look at. The purpose we were doing this for this preview, we weren't just going to preview every race, every meeting. We've tried to find out what we think our best bets are. I'm glad that you marked on your list, Will, to cover the 12:45, because there's no way we're not singing off the same hymn sheet in here. Asta La Pasta is one of my strongest fancies for the whole festive period. Back up to 2.5 miles. The run behind Caliph de Burley and Tedley last time was, I wouldn't say massively eye-catching in terms of that they weren't trying their best, but it was a good performance. I put Tedley up that day. Sad that he hit the front as soon as he did, because I think he does dawdle a little bit in front. But Asta La Pasta ran a real good effort to get as close as he did to them. A couple of RPRs now are much higher than his 130 rating. I just think he's absolutely... I don't want to be a shoo-in and say that everyone should like lump into him, but there's 9 places up for grabs. He's 7-2 at the time of recording. You can have I think a fairly reasonable each way bet on him with the sort of cover that he might, if he does find one too good, then you get some of your money back. But Asta La Pasta, I think, wins this race, and I'm hoping, Will, you're in agreement, please.
I am. Yeah, no, I certainly am. I think he's a horse that, and the Skeltons are so good at targeting a race when they get one in Dan's mind, to get one there in the right kind of form with the right kind of recent profile. And Asta La Pasta very much is that horse here. It's turned into a 0-130 novice handicap, this race. It used to be 0-135, I think. And quite conveniently, he's managed to get Asta La Pasta in here off 130, having had 3 runs over fences, giving him some nice experience around some good tracks against some good horses. And he's now got, his perfect set of conditions, really, 2.5 miles right-handed, which he got at Carlisle when he won that 3-runner race where Pick Rock came down early and he basically belted the other horse in the race. But actually, if you take, the bare form of that, you think, well, he's entitled to beat Kilter. But the time of the race was really, really strong. And the fact that he had to do that on his own, setting his own tempo, I think is right, really, really impressive from Asta La Pasta. And the time of the Newbury race as well, behind Caliph de Burley, was very, very strong. Compares very, very, very favourably with the 2.5 mile races over fences on the same card, the ones won by Le Patron and the Jukebox Man. So I think he's got to go well. He's got everything absolutely right for him. The only obvious worries are potential flying the ointments with the opposition, really. There are a few other potentially progressive types, but I don't think any are quite as well suited as Asta La Pasta is to this particular race at this time of year. The chief rival or the chief danger would be Es Perfecto, who was third in the race last year and won on his seasonal debut. But I just think Asta La Pasta is going to have a bit too much for him. I think he's absolutely tuned up to be ready.
Absolutely. And it looks the typical novice handicap chase, doesn't it? We've had, I think, 9 of the last 10 have been 6-year-olds. Last year was a 5-year-old Tom Lacey's Blow You Would, I think it was. And I looked at Skelton's runners in here as well. Al Nadam, maybe that was 2020, was 4-1, just didn't get suited to the track. But he ran a couple of horses before that ran second in the race. So if he sends one in the race, they're here to try and win, I think. And I think the 72 about him might be long gone by the time our columns go out. But I've been wrong before. I could be wrong again, but I fancy Asta La Pasta. So hopefully we've kicked off the show with a nice winner there. Right, Calto Star, Novices Chase. I still call it the Feltham. I always will. You've mentioned the Jukebox Man there at Newbury. Of course, he comes in here as a short price favourite. He's 6-5. On figures, he's only £1 better than Highland, and he's only a handful of pounds better than Massial, White Rhino. Welcome to Cartridge is a bit to find on figures, but I look at this one and think the Jukebox Man looks like a nice horse, but no way in my mind would I want to be having a bet in the race. However, I think you might want to do so, Will.
Yeah, well, I think there's one horse that's potentially quite significantly overpriced in here, and it's the one that you mentioned has a bit to find, Welcome to Cartridge. And I do think he's got a bit to find, but I think there's reasons to think that he could easily find that. The Jukebox Man's run at Newbury was a good one, and at the time it was worth getting excited about because he jumped and travelled well and he was impressive, and it was given quite a lot of airtime as a result of that. And I think that's just maybe caught hold a bit too much because the sort of bare numbers of what he actually did in terms of time and etc., it wasn't spectacular. It wasn't standout. He could easily improve. I mean, he's got the look of a horse that will clearly improve with racing, but I don't think he's done enough on that particular run to warrant being close to even money in this particular race. So Welcome to Cartridge is available at 14-1 with the obviously each way proviso 5 runners, so you get that extra place, 2 places for an each way bet. And he was a progressive staying hurdler last year. He finished second in the River Don. But if you watched him over hurdles last year, he was just a big shell of a horse, real frame. And you look at him on his chase debut, first start this season after a wind-up at Sandown, and he just looked like a lot stronger, a lot more refined model. And for a long way behind Handstands, which I think is a better piece of form than the Jukebox Man, let it be said. For a long way, he was clear second best in that particular race and giving Handstands a race. And then he just faded after the last on account of race finished 4th. He's obviously got a bit to find on official ratings, but I think Paul Nicholls wouldn't be throwing him into this race if he didn't feel that he was up to it. He could easily go and win a 0-135 handicap with him, but off the back of that eye-catching chase debut, I thought he was worth a play at 14-1 each way here because I don't think he's got as much to find with the principles as the market does suggest.
Yeah, that's fair. And I've looked at the Jukebox Man as well. I don't think he's been this way around. He hasn't been right-handed. You look at Welcome to Cartridge, those 2 runs over hurdles after pointing at Ascot were good efforts. They're both right-handed. And that Sandown run last time stunk of Paul Nicholls throwing him in the deep end because he knows how good a horse he is. But imagine that as a prep coming in for a race like this. Yeah. Handstands, the ground, everything came up good for that horse that day, didn't it? So, I mean, I can certainly see the case, Will. 5 runners, like you say, at the moment. I don't think anything's going to nothing's got any reason to come out, has it? That is a sneaky little each way. Yeah, there might be some betting with that as well. Okay, Will, you've done it again. You always seem to do this when we do these previews. You just like talk me into looking at something slightly differently. But that's the reason to talk horses, right? And that's the reason we want to look at this stuff, because it's good to find out different views. Right. Was there any more from Kempton?
No.
Right. We will move on to Aintree then. So Aintree's got a real good card. There's a few horses that are going to be running, I think, at Aintree that were supposed to be out of that Beecher Chase meeting that was obviously called off. We're looking at the 12:30, the first race, 2.5 mile handicap chase. We've got Western in the Park, favourite at the moment, 9-4. Richmond Lake, second, 11-4. He was due to run at that Beach Chase meet. We've got Heltenham in there. Imperial Saint, who's been a winner on the column earlier this season. Herbiers for the Greenall and Guerrero stable. And then Petit Tonnerre, always running. He's only a 6-year-old, but will he ever win a race again? Will, who do you like in the 12:30 at Aintree?
The favourite, unoriginally. I was hoping that because of the depth or supposed depth of the race and a few other fairly likely types, that we were going to get a slightly bigger price about Western in the Park. But I think probably one of the angles that I'll look to do on Boxing Day is quite a large each way double Western in the Park and Asta La Pasta, because I think Ollie Murphy's chaser is, I mean, he's just taken the eye out over fences twice now. At Stratford, he was ridden very conservatively, very cold, and I don't think he really appreciated that, but he won a handicap that he was well up to winning under Sean Byrne, and he ended up winning by 14 lengths in the end, having not looked like he was going to win at the halfway stage. But then he went to Cheltenham's novice handicap chase at the November meeting. He was bounced out, given a really, really positive, prominent ride by Sean Byrne. And for the most part, he really responded to it. He jumped well. It was a strongly run race, had the likes of Peaky Boy in there, Guard Your Dreams, leader in the park. So it was a very strong race, I think, and it was running a quick time on account of Western in the Park. He didn't fade. He raced prominently, and he still boxed on for second behind Peaky Boy. And I just think he's got so much more to give. Notable that he had a few potential options that he could have been entered in over the course of the festive period, but Ollie Murphy, I think, throughout has noticed this valuable race worth 18 grand to the winner with a progressive chaser. I think he's going to take a lot of beating around Aintree, Western in the Park.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, so he's 9-4 at the time of recording. I think he opened up a little bit shorter, but I feel, actually saying that now, he's gone to 15-8 as the top prices. So where that will be by the time this is published, or where that will be by the time the columns go out, will have to be decided. But yes, strong case made there. Good run behind Peaky Boy last time. I think that horse is a real nice type as well, isn't he? Right, we'll move on to the next race at Aintree, which is the 105, because I want to talk about the Formby Novices Hurdle, but it won't take very long. Good looking renewal. Obviously used to be the Tolworth run at Sandown, and in those days we used to always look at it thinking, well, might be wet at Sandown. It also might be a horse or suited to a horse that wants to stay, end up being more of a Baddymore, Gallagher's or Turner's Novices Hurdle, whatever it is these days. Might not be the case still now at Aintree, but I think it is used by trainers with the same sort of mould in there. But the reason I'm talking about all this before I even mention the horse, people don't know it here by the way that I'm talking, but you look at horses like Forheen or Simon Sig, like real good Baddymore type horses, they would have won at 2 miles anyway if they'd have gone at the Supreme. They just have that touch of class about them. And Potter's Charm goes in here against Roadless Travelled, Country Mile, Celtic Dino, Miami Magic, Junkie Edelan, and Good and Clever. This race could have been deeper. Gordon Elliott might have sent Romeo Coolier over to this, but Potter's Charm, 2-1, just looks an absolute standout price. He's the type of horse that I'd imagine, although he's dropping back in trip and people might question that, I thought he'd have been a lot shorter than he is. He's got £8, like a higher rating than anyone else in the field. And I know the run last time at Cheltenham was beating Valgrand, that maybe he's just not as good as we thought he was, but he absolutely slapped him up. And there was a 2 mile 5 handicap hurdle the same day. I think it was a conditional jockeys. And you watch those races side by side just to get a feel for the speeds that they were going at. They just crawled for the first circuit in the Potter's Charm race. And then as they turned to go downhill on the second time round, Harry Skelton turned the screw, they started to go a bit quicker. But it wasn't like it was running a race where they've gone hell for leather from the start and his stamina was the reason he won it. He just sped past them towards the end. I think you mentioned when we previewed that card as well that Willie Twiston-Davies probably oversold it, he said himself after, but was really excited about this horse, and he's won like an absolute good thing. Even if he has got an inflated rating, he's not £8 wrong or not £8 inflated, which still puts him out on top here. I think the drop back in trip will be fine. The reason I mentioned Gordon Elliott's a little bit is because Farron Glory probably would have won this last year. He is a 2 mile, but Django Bay picked up the pieces. We've seen he's effective over the middle trip. So I think we're getting a price about Potter's Charm because he's run over the middle trip and now he's dropping back. But I think he's worthy of being a short price favourite. 2-1 top price at the time of recording. I reckon he'll go off no bigger than 5-4 in the race. He may even get even shorter than that. But I don't know. There might back some ones in behind, but I just think Potter's Charm wins this. I know you this wasn't one you were particularly going to cover, Will, but you liked Potter's Charm before he ran at Cheltenham. Do you think he's got a chance back in trip?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I think the one thing here is this should be a well-run race as well, because you got Celtic Dino and Road Less Travelled, who are a perennial, in their races so far. In a couple of career starts, they've looked to go forward and look to set the tempo. So I think it'll be a well-run race at 2 miles. It'll sort them out, and I do. On what we've seen so far, Potter's Charm, I think, is the best of them, definitely. The fact is there are a few horses that could improve as well. At this stage of their career, they're all 5-year-olds. They've got a bit more to fill in terms of their size and scope with some of them. But yeah, really intriguing grade 1. Looks well up to scratch, I think. There's some really nice, interesting young horses in there.
Definitely. And I think Potter's Charm's not necessarily the finished article, but at the stage that he's at the moment, he's ahead of these ones. Hence why I'm relatively bullish on Potter's Charm. Right. The next race at Aintree, we'll look at the 140, a guaranteed. I say guaranteed. The top price guaranteed handicap hurdle, 2 mile 4. You're loving these middle distances, Will. Good race this. We've got the Aintree bumper winner of however many years ago, Florida Dreams. Patriotic's in there as well, a horse that people fancied at Haydock last time out. Uncle Bert going back over hurdles, I think Uncle Bert. Was he chasing recently? Anyway, waffling too much in there. The 140 was a race you wanted to look at, Will. Who do you like in here?
Yeah, it's one of those that you've mentioned, actually. Patriotic. Not going to jump off the bandwagon. I was on it for that Haydock race where, he unseated far enough out that you have no idea how he would have fared. But my instinct was, because he was held up right in the rear, that he probably wouldn't have got into things anyway. So it was a case of it pretty much knowing that perhaps we'd done our money early on because of the way that races were panning out at Haydock that day. But I'd watched him once he'd unseated Isabel Williams. He sort of cantered around behind the field for a while, but then disappeared out of view. So probably didn't give himself too much of a hard time, I would have hoped. Sometimes you see those horses that fall or unseat, they tear around like what's and do themselves a bit of a disservice. But hopefully he's none the worse. He's fresh as paint, and still really remember fresh in the memory how eye-catching he was in the Silver Trophy at Chepstow, which was over this kind of trip, 2.5 miles on what will probably be similar kind of ground, good to soft, stroke soft in places. That should be just about perfect, really. And the key thing, Aintree can be a track that can favour prominent races as well, but there are 1 or 2 in here that will go, that will push forward as well. So I'm hoping it just produces a nice, evenly run 2.5 miles. And I think that given we've got the likes of Uncle Bert, Active Authority, Red Dirt Road, Florida Dreams, they're all coming here off the back of good runs. I'm hoping that we get a decent price about Patriotic, and we can sort of have a decent each way bet with the 9-runner field.
Nice. Well, 6 to 1 I can see at the moment is currently available. Of course, like all prices and things can change. But yeah, it looks real good race, doesn't it? And obviously, when things don't necessarily pan out for a horse, we have to be forgiving of them, don't we? Obviously, that I can be too forgiving of a horse. I mean, I've tipped up Brave Man's Game in the King George, but a lot of people are fast to write off horses, aren't they? And sometimes the market misses that too, doesn't it? The season unseat sees that they're going to be too big a price, and then the money might come for them after. Right. The last race we're going to look at on Boxing Day is up in Wetherby. It's the Roland Merrick, a race that I started to look at a bit more, started to look at even more. Then we've seen final declarations, and I'm in an iron of where my thoughts would sit on this one. I think the reason for that is there's horses that I don't 100% know whether they're targeting this race or not. I get a bit nervous with it, and then when I start to read too much into it and overanalyze it, I just start to spiral and think, there's plenty of other races to look at. I won't look at that. So I'm very curious to know your thoughts on this one, Will. We've got Cruise Control head in the market for Tom Lacey, Stan Shepherd, 11-4. One at Aintree, didn't he, over this sort of distance. Some scope for Callum Pritchard taking the ride. He's got a good book of rides, I think, at Wetherby, to be fair to him. For Richard Hobson, 4-1 second in. Then we've got Tamaris at 9-2. 6-1 Sign Nominee, Young Busters 8-1, Good Boy Bobby's 9-1, Kanodu Kwetu's 14-1, and Mr. Incredible 20-1. So even though we've got just the 8 runners in it, good names in there, all probably you could make some sort of case for, but who's the strongest case you can make for, Will?
Yeah, it's one of those races that, like you said, first glance, and you think, could be tricky enough because there's a few horses that have been on the radar for lots of people over the last however many months or whatever. But actually, when you delve a bit deeper into the form and the profile of some of them, I think you can discount quite a few quite quickly here. I must admit, the one that stands out like a sore thumb to me, and I'd probably put him as close to being the second best bet of the day, I think, is Some Scope. Because I think if you go back to the back end of last season, after he'd won at Doncaster and then finished a cracking second in the Grimthorpe to Does He Know on ground that he'd have absolutely hated. He was pulled up on his seasonal debut at Cheltenham this year. I don't think that's his track, and B, he's had a wind up since then. So I think there are probably reasons to think that he definitely wasn't going to be at his best that day. And the run he put in the rehearsal chase on what was a bit of a confidence-boosting mission, I thought was a really eye-catching one. Obviously, chasing home at a respectable distance, Frero Bamboo and the Changing Man. But Frero Bamboo clearly improved massively for stepping up to 3 miles. The Changing Man put in a cracker down at Ascot, was unlucky last weekend. I think it's strong form generally. And some scope, as is his wont, he was held up, ridden cold, and he sort of came through and picked through rivals and finished just about never near a fourth, really. And it was just a lovely run, which will have set him up nicely, I think. And I think he'll find that this is nowhere near as competitive as I thought the rehearsal chase was. I think if you delve into the form, like I say, of some of those in opposition here, I think that Richard Hobson will be over the moon with what he's seen in terms of declarations. And it's a quite a valuable race, 28 grand to the winner. I think he'll be pretty bullish, I would imagine. And the fact that he's booked Callum Pritchard as well is notable. Just a note on Callum Pritchard, he obviously claims £7 from 10 stone 2, so that would put him down to 9 stone 9. The lowest he's ridden at in the last 12 months is 9 stone 12, so he might put up a pound or two overweight, but I think at that's not going to make a jot of difference to me. I think he's clearly just a very capable pilot on a horse that I hope has been teed up quite nicely for this valuable prize.
I like it. And I do like some scope as well. I just get worried with him when I say about you don't know when they're going to pull the trigger on some of these horses. He's one of those. And I fear with him because I think a couple of runs ago, no, it was last time I put him up as a bit of an each way thing. He's about 25. I think he got supported in. I just worry with him that I'll end up betting him at the wrong times and then almost you go over a cliff with the horse. And then when they finally do win, I'm only just about getting my money back. So that's why I'm treating some scope with caution. But yeah, 4-1 at the moment. I mean, he's probably a good thing, with Callum Pritchard, because Callum Pritchard's some proper jockey as well. And I think Richard Hobson's got lucky that he was up there riding some other horses and he's been able to snatch him to go on there. So I like that, Will. I don't know if you have talked me into another bet. Sorry, another bet or not. I'm choking at the thought.
Callum Pritchard rode Doc Pick Me, who finished a neck runner-up to Charlie Uber-Arles at Doncaster a couple of weekends ago. So he's clearly a jockey that they've got very much on their radar, the yard.
Like it. Right. We're going to move on to the 27th now, Will. Was there any races at Kempton we wanted to look at for the 27th?
On the 27th, I don't think there was specifically. We haven't obviously got the declarations for the English cards as yet.
No.
Yeah, there was nothing really that
looked quite
good. Stood out. I mean, the Wayward Lad is the one, Ballyburn against Sagino, we hope, as long as they're both declared. It would seem, we're speaking on the 23rd here, obviously, so we'll find out. But Ballyburn, it looks as if Paul Townend will be coming over because he hasn't been dropped up on any of the Leopardstown or Limerick cards on the 27th. And Sagino hasn't been declared for the Christmas hurdle. So we could have a real good clash there in the 2 mile novice chase. And
he'll be having to give weight to Sagino as well, which is crazy, isn't it? So that is a race that's fully in the balance. Imagine having these races. We talk about it in horse racing where you want to see the best going against the best. Lossy Mouth is being supported, but you've got Lossy Mouth, Constitution Hill, and then Sagino and Ballyburn potentially going head to head. I'm a big advocate of it. It isn't all about Cheltenham, but they've got to have the opportunities to come up against each other. So when these things do happen, might be heading down to Kempton. Right, we do know the declarations for Leopardstown. So if we dip over there, Will, because I know there's a race that you wanted to have a look at, and there's a couple of races you wanted to look at, and there's definitely a race I need to talk about because this would be one of my stronger fancies of the festive period for a dirty little each way bet for sure. But the 12:35, a beginner's chase, one you've highlighted that you'd like to have a look at. Some good horses in it, lots of names to mention, too many to mention. So who is it that you like within here?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky, these beginners' chases in Ireland at this stage of the year, because we've got so many good horses running in them, and then so many of them will be sort of starting out on the trail to getting handicap for spring festivals. So it's tricky to be completely dogmatic about it. But one horse that I feel has needed a drop to 2 miles for a long time is What's Up Darling, who's had his last 4 starts over 2.5 miles, 2 of which came in the Martin Pipe at the Cheltenham Festival, and then at Aintree behind Katira, He then had a run over hurdles at Fairyhouse on his first start this season, and then he finished fourth to Ilat Lontique over 2.5 miles at Navan in probably one of the best beginners chases run so far this year. And again, he showed so much pace for me that he just looked like he needed dropping back in trip. So could be that, maybe he's a horse they're trying to line up for a Grand Annual or something like that. But it's interesting that they're dropping him down to 2 miles 1 furlong now. I think if they were trying to get him handicapped nicely, they'd probably go again at 2.5, let him get outstayed, and then try and get his mark. So I just thought he was very, very interesting. It'll be interesting to see how he's priced up first and foremost, and then which way he goes in the market. But I think he's a horse that will win races over 2 miles over fences. So probably going to find it hard to let him go unpacked, I think, here.
Yeah, it is one of those. And like you said, there's loads of horses in as well. There's 14 runners in there. There's lots of big names. As much as I didn't mention too many of them, there's It's For Me in there, No Flies on Him, Shambali Kid, The Big Doyen, Western Diego, Nürburgring, Birdie or Bust. So, I mean, if you wanted to hide a horse in a race, that's the race you'd probably want to do.
That's the worry.
But if you've got, like you say, if you've got the angle of the drop back in trip, then like you say, it does then make it difficult to go against them. But then that's where the market comes in, right? If they're priced accordingly and they're too short a price and everyone else thinks the same, then you just have to let them go, don't you? But if there's a bit of a price and there's 14 runners and you maybe get a free each way swing at horses like this, then who knows? Could be a good one. Right, we'll move on to the Paddy Power Rewards Club chase, the 2 mile 1 chase. This is the race we talked about with Gaelic Warrior not coming to the King George. He is going here. Now, well, I feel like I can keep this one fairly brief, but you know me, I like to waffle a little bit. It's a really good race, right? We've got Gaelic Warrior, Founder 50, Dino Blue, Marine National, Captain Guinness, Gentleman to Me, Blue Lord, Solness, Visionarian, Sanicha. Like, it is a decent renewal, but the Hiddyway chase recently, where Energamine, everyone was saying that he's back. He was weak in that market that day. Willie Mullins' stablemate Dino Blue was strong in the market that day. And for all that she was well beaten when Banbridge sort of unseated at the end and was never really in contention of doing it, she was £10 wrong with Energamine. And it's something just sat right with me, or didn't sit right with me in that race, in the fact that she was being bet. I was thinking, even if she is flying and what any of that sort of stuff, if Energamine's that far below par that he can't get £10 from her and still slam her, then they wouldn't be running him. So I didn't really buy into the market move as much, but it's still a sign of confidence and a vote of confidence. She took this race 12 months ago, obviously now back into a grade 1. She just gets her £7 from the boys. The Mare's Chase one I thought last year was good because the question marks about whether she stays or not, that was on bad ground, and she did look like she stayed. I just think that shows the class of her, where I talked about like Forheens and Simon Sig. I know they're very different types of horses, but if you've got a real good 2 miler, they're probably just going to outclass other horses at the middle trip. Back at this distance is perfect for her. She won this race 12 months ago, and she's obviously had that prep run. And as far as I'm concerned, it was definitely a prep run, because you're mad to run a horse £10 wrong with someone like Energamine if it wasn't just for the sake of getting them ready for this. So Mark Walsh is dropped up. She's got the tongue tie on, which doesn't particularly bother me. But with the Irish horses, they don't have to disclose if they've had wind drops or any of that sort of stuff. So maybe they did expect more last time out, and they've tinkered with that. But I think this definitely would have been a plan. I know we've got the likes of Gaelic Warrior, Founder 50, Marine National in there, but Marine National needs more than a tongue tie. He's looked like he doesn't breathe at all anymore. Founder 50, I still think probably wants the middle trip to show his absolute best. And as much as I love Gaelic Warrior, he's thrown in howlers, left-handed, right-handed, and all sorts of ways round. And I know his Arkle run was really good, but at Leopardstown, going this way round, he is probably opposable, and he's got Patrick on board. So I said I wasn't going to waffle. I felt like I needed to get it out, Will. So thanks for the therapy. But 7-1 Dino Blue is, or Dino Blue, 10 runners, each way 3 places. I mean, unless she has been like a bit dubious at her fences before, but she's been fine recently. Like, she doesn't look like she's going to fall, and obviously it can happen to any horse. But bar a serious mistake, I do not see how she's out the 3. And I also don't see how even Gaelic Warrior manages to give her £7 in here. So I really fancy Dino Blue. If she was conservatively priced at, say, 3-1, I would probably still be betting her. So I think 7-1 just looks a massive, I wouldn't say rick, but I think it's a rick. I think she's way too big a price. Just your quick thoughts on that, Will, to see if you need to calm me down a little bit and make me go easy on that one.
Oh, yeah. No, I can see the case, definitely. The fact that she's had a run, as well, against the likes of Gaelic Warrior. Gaelic Warrior, like you said, 2 miles around Leopardstown, sharp enough at the Christmas meeting. I know he's won an Arkle, but that turned into pretty testing ground, wasn't it? He'd had a few runs. He'd got himself ironed out the cobwebs, if you will. And I think, like you're right, Founder 50, I think probably needs a bit further, probably needs to go right-handed too. Likes of Captain Guinness, Gentleman to Me, Marine National, are they quite the forces of old? So yeah, quite quickly you're thinning down the field, aren't you? And at least with Dino Blue, she's suited to this trip, this distance, this track. It's a pretty solid each way bet, I'd say.
Thank you very much, Will. Well, you always put me on to one.
I mean, she's going to go and win just because we might have just given her the double penalty.
Well, maybe, but I think she'll be right. Yep, I know it's probably like maybe frowned upon to say this, but I always do want to treat mares with caution, because sometimes if they do go off the boil or something comes up, then it can be real bad. The run last time was fine, but she was still well beaten. Banbridge would have slammed her as well. And like I said, the fact they're reaching for the tongue tie, maybe not all is 100% with her. So obviously it's always gamble responsibly, but we're going to get stuck into Dino Blue. You'll be able to find out how much on the column on Friday. Get my days confused. Right, the 2 mile handicap hurdle, Will. The 2:20 at Leopardstown was a race you wanted to have a look at. We've got 21 runners in here. I don't know how you've had time to manage to get through all of these, but maybe there was just one that stood out and you didn't even need to dive too deep to realise that you found the winner of the 2:20 at Leopardstown, right?
Well, whether I found the winner or not, or whether I found a horse that will definitely win a valuable 2 mile handicap hurdle, I'll just put that proviso in there. It's Ethical Diamond for Willie Mullins, who is a very, very good flat horse, very speedy flat horse. Joined the yard having won a Limerick maiden and then ran in all of those good juvenile hurdles last year. Beaten out of sight in a couple of them, including the Triumph Hurdle, but it was the one in between at the Dublin Racing Festival where was within 5 or 6 lengths of the likes of Cargeezy and one or two others, Calaconte and all of those good horses, Madgeborough. That's a standout to me, and the fact that Ethical on the flat off marks in the 80s. And now they're coming back to hurdles off a pretty workable hurdle mark. Even on what he'd done in that second hurdle run last season, a mark of 132 looks, pretty lenient, really. So given the fact he's, up into the mid-90s on the flat now, they've got a hood on just to try and calm him down. The ground should be spot on for him. But just half in the back of my mind is the fact that the 2 mile handicap hurdle at the Dublin Racing Festival is probably worth about 3 times more. So, you could easily see him run well here, run into 3rd or 4th. That will put him spot on for that. Or they might think they've got enough in hand. We'll go and win this, even, get raised £7 or £8 and we'll still have enough in hand to go and win that. I don't know. But at some stage, he's definitely going to win a valuable 2 mile handicap hurdle. And if he's priced accordingly here and you can get, a decent each way price, then, which you probably won't be, but he was a horse I wanted to mention because he's going to win a good race for them.
Yeah, I agree. And it was testing ground last year for all the juvenile campaign, wasn't it? And that's like you mentioned, Cheltenham was testing, but for the whole of the turn of the year, it was heavier ground, and then running so well on faster ground on the flat. Yeah. Like you say, the hood's been reached for. I don't know how heavy it's going to get at Leopardstown. It's yielding at the moment. I don't know. There's too much about, but again, it's like 96-hour forecast we're looking at, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I think it'll be decent ground. So that should suit.
Perfect. And they're good ones to watch. Well, I know there's 21 horses you have to keep an eye on them, but it'll be an easy one to spot, but you'll be able to see something in behind. Like if today's not the day or Friday's not the day, you'll be able to visibly see it, and then you can go in again next time. So appreciate you saying, obviously we need to treat them with caution. They might have plans down the line, but again, if you've got one like this that you think's got a proper chance, they're handicapped well enough, you can't let them go if the price is there, can you? Right, that's Leopardstown covered, I believe. We're going to move to Wales for Friday, going to Chepstow. There's a couple of races here you wanted to look at. The 105 handicap chase. Oh, I did look at this one, but I'd swiftly turned off. Right, we haven't got the final declarations for British racing, so just quickly to touch on that one. It's hurt to watch this one because Lowry's bar's at the top, and I tipped against him last time, and I felt bad for doing it because I thought that there was a case to be made for Lowry's bar, and he got the job done. So please don't say it's Lowry's bar again, Will.
It's not, no, and look, as you said, the proviso here is they haven't declared as yet. There's only a couple of firms that have actually priced up this race anti-post as well. So, but Larry's bar will run well. That's absolutely for sure if he does get declared here. I just think that maybe 2.5 miles around Chepstow is on the sharp side for him. He needed every yard of that 2 mile 3 in a lesser race at Exeter to get the better of Stormy Flight. So I think he's going to be a horse that wants 3 miles in time, Larry's bar. So he might just be one that is a little bit vulnerable at this trip. Whereas a horse that I think is is going to be very, very suited to coming back to this trip is Colonel Harry, who ran in obviously the old Hennessy and patently didn't stay. I mean, he went so well on the front end for so long of that race. And given the fact that, that's a good 6 furlongs further than he'd pretty much ever gone before, he was really into unknown territory over the last couple of fences there. And it was only really between about the 3rd and 4th last that he properly backed out of it. And I don't think Gavin Sheehan gave him a tough time after that. So plus the ground would have been on the lively side. He's actually entered in at Cheltenham on New Year's Day in their valuable 2.5 mile handicap chase as well. But I think Chepstow is a more suitable track, and it's also probably going to be softer ground as well. So I'd be amazed if Jamie Snowden didn't see this as a really good opportunity to get Colonel Harry's career back on track after that run in the old Hennessy. And he is sort of 10 to 1, 12 to 1 with those firms that are pricing up right now. So he's not been declared. So it's a risk to back him, but I must admit I have. I'm willing to take that risk because I think if he gets declared, then he surely outruns those odds, given how well tipped up and fancied he was for that Hennessy. And this is a much lesser race at a more suitable trip, at a more suitable track on a more suitable ground.
I like that, Will. And this is what always makes me laugh with a handicapper. You get some horses that will take forever and an age to get dropped, and then you get a horse like Colonel Harry that gets dropped £2 when, like you say, just clearly didn't stay. It's crazy. You just run the horse over the wrong trip, and the handicapper will definitely remove the weight. But if they run okay over the right distance and they need some help, they never get it, do they? So Colonel Harry's definitely interesting there. The 2:10 at Chepstow, we've got handicap hurdle, nearly 3 miles. Major Fortunes in here for Harry and Dan Skelton. Woody Flash is in here for Ollie Murphy. Phantom of the Points, he ran eye-catching last time out for David Pipe and Jack Tudor. A load of other names that we could potentially mention, but is it one of the 3 that I've just said, Will?
Yeah, it is. And again, would need to get declared, etc., and the price would need to be right. But Phantom of the Points, I thought ran a belting race in that the valuable handicap hurdle at Haydock's Betfair Chase meeting behind Shoot First. Shoot First was a bit disappointing in the long walk. I was expecting him to run a bit better than that, but that was a really tough race at Haydock. Maybe he left the race behind a little bit there, which would again be the worry for Phantom of the Points because he's been lightly raced. But I think you could also look at that the other way and think, well, he has been lightly raced, so he's got a bit more juice in the locker, you'd hope. And off the back of that, that really good run on his seasonal debut, this would be a good bit easier. It'll still be softish ground, which will suit him, but it won't be quite as attritional as it was at Haydock, you'd imagine. And I'd be pretty surprised and pretty disappointed if he's not able to win a good 3 mile handicap hurdle, Phantom of the Points.
Oh, I like that one as well. And a couple of runs ago, he was running at Chepstow because I remember watching him there. Someone else that I do a bit of horsey stuff with made the case for him at Haydock that the step up in trip would be absolutely ideal for him. And I wasn't 100% buying it. So I sort of wasn't convinced until I saw that last run. If you go back and look at his 2 mile form, even Florida Dreams that we mentioned earlier, he may not scale the heights that he should have done. But if he's doing that to horses at the wrong trip, like I say, the handicapper dropped Colonel Harry when he was clearly running over the wrong trip. This horse only went up £2 for that Haydock run. And if he's only gone up £2 for running at the right trip, like you say, to turn around and things like he could have left the race there, but that could have been a prep run to come and go and win something else. I know it's a big, valuable prize pot, but
he wasn't very strong in the market.
No, 22s he went off. 25 to 22s, I think was all it was, wasn't it?
Weak, which for that race, the Pipes have a history with it. I know previously when it was a fixed brush hurdle race, but if they felt that, they had a horse that was tuned up and ready for it, then I don't think he'd have gone off 22 to 1. So you might be right there. He might come on for the run. If he does, he's going to be very hard to beat.
That's crazy, isn't it? Well, I like the look of that one. And the thing is as well, I say this a lot on when I preview the races, it's a 0 to 145. So again, when we look sometimes historically, it's still eligible for horses 146 and 147. We don't have anything of that sort of caliber in this race. I think we've got 134 Lossy mouth for Polly Gundy in there, but it's a 0 to 135. If that horse comes out, it's a 0 to 130. It's not the sort of scale of that grade 3 that he ran in. And we talk about him being not very strong in the market. Shoot First was a 6 to 1 out to 25s or whatever, wasn't he? So the market got that race completely wrong. And maybe Pipe would have preferred it if he could have got hidden further back and not got the £2 rise. But I like that one as well, Will. So I reckon we can wrap up there. Otherwise, I'll waffle on for over an hour more. We've covered quite a lot there for quite a few races. As I say, you'll be able to check the link in the description for the Which Bookie daily tips. Go to the Which Bookie website. Very easy to find. They're updated daily with what Will and myself fancy for each of the races. We'll put potentially like stakes in there, or we'll tell you the sort of each way terms of which bookies to go find them at. But really appreciate your guys' support for watching this one. Will, do we want to try and leave the viewers with a Christmas nap of the races we've previewed? I'll put us under pressure again.
Well, I'm sensing you're going to go with a certain one in the first at Kempton, so I'll leave that one to you, and I'll go with some scope in the Roland Merrick up at Wetherby, the 135, I think it is, at Wetherby on Boxing Day.
Love that. So we've got some scope in the Roland Merrick. We're both in agreement with Asta Pasta, so we'll give that to people as a bonus one. But yeah, Dino Blue at 7-1. Look, there is the caution of the tongue tie that's going on there, but if everything's all good with her, which I believe it must be, I think she's a ridiculous price for a filthy each way stab in that Paddy Power Reward Club chase. Right, thank you, Will, so much for your time taking this. Hope you have a great Christmas and a happy new year. Same to all of you guys out there as well. Thank you for your support and for watching this. Hope you have the best of times with your family, whatever you're doing, and we will see you again in the new year for some more of these previews.